A little bit of a status update. Ended up removing this out of the way, the AC compressor, even though I said I wouldn't. Got the plug out with it in place, but I couldn't get a new one in because previous owners, I don't know why, like half of these V12s, I find especially this plug up here is cross-threaded. Welcome back to Living with a Classic, and this is my friend's 1983, I believe, Jaguar XJS V12. In the previous video on this car, we got running and driving for the first time in over 20 years, but it has some issues. If you remember, the power steering was non-existent, have some extra fluid, we're going to add that, see if it works, and it's a bit of a 10-cylinder at the moment. We're missing 2 cylinders on one side. I have a new set of plugs, so we're going to start in that end, and we're just going to make sure that we have a good, healthy engine before we throw a bunch of parts at it, because we're going to do all the hoses and belts and everything. But we want to make sure we have a nice 12-cylinder engine to start with. So the plan is we're going to add some transmission fluid, drive this thing up to my workshop, and the next couple days I'm going to change out the plugs. We'll start by changing out the ones on the bank that is not having all the cylinders running. So one side, if I remember, I think A bank had all 6 cylinders fire, and B bank just had 4 cylinders firing. So we'll start with the simple stuff, plugs, and then, move on from there. I have some old spare plug wires laying around that I know are good. Like I said, we're not going to throw out too many new parts at first, just to make sure it's fine. I do have some extra rotors and things, quite a lot of V12 parts laying around. But let's add some fluid to the power steering, see if the thing still fires up, and it makes it up to the workshop. Power steering reservoir is now filled, slightly over full, but that's going to be fine because about your air in the lines. I also added a little bit more to the transmission because remember that was slightly low last time, and I added the last of the fluid I had at home to get it to move. And just remember that I hope the battery's fine. I didn't put that on a charge, but I hope it will fire up. We will prime it a couple times just to give it the biggest chance of firing into life. And come on. Oh, you can do it? No, you can't. All right, I'm gonna get a spare battery, some jumper cables, and we'll get this thing going. Got a fellow V12 helping out here, so hopefully we'll have enough juice to get it going. There we go. We just disconnect all this, move this white XJS V12 out of the way, and then we'll try and get it up to the workshop. Alternator's woken up, so it is charging at least now. And it's going into gear pretty nicely. Just gotta try and get it out of here. And main power steering still needs to be aired out, but it's definitely doing a lot more than it did before. Now I'm just gonna make it up the hill and into the workshop. And the car is in the workshop, made it here, but that was 2 weeks ago, and some things have come up since. As you know, we have torn up the floor in that building, and we're waiting for concrete to get poured, so that is one thing I'm busy with. Also, the Range Rover was broken, and that is all fixed. So now we're moving on to this car. I have new plugs for it, and that's where we're going to start, because I just want to get this thing running on 12, make sure it runs nicely on 12 cylinders before we move on with everything else, because we're going to do the whole fuel system, all the hoses, all the coolant hoses, vacuum lines, you name it, we're going to do it all. Just get this thing nice and reliable for my friend so he can use it as his summer daily, which he wants to do. But if I remember correctly, it's the B bank that has a couple cylinders down. I think we're down on 2 cylinders on that side. So let's start by replacing the plugs on that side, see if that fixes anything. Of course, we'll do the other side as well. But, we're just going to try and do the bare minimum now to see if we get this thing on all 12 before we throw a bunch of money at it. We've done several videos on replacing plugs on the V12, but both the pre-HE and the HE. This, of course, being an HE. So I have a complete video on doing all of that. So I won't do this, you know, in complete detail, but they're pretty easy to get to. They're not as bad as people say. The ones up front can be a little tricky, especially if they haven't been replaced in a while, because some people don't know how to get to them. So then you may need to remove the AC compressor or just move that to the side to get to them more easily. I do have some special wrenches to get them off without removing that, but that really only works if they're not completely seized in place. So I'm going to start removing these out. When I get a few of them out, I'll show you what they look like, and they're probably pretty black, but we may see, you know, a couple of them that are not firing at all. I'm just on the first plug I'm trying to take out here, and they are quite stuck. You gotta realize the car's been sitting for, what is it, 21, 22 years, and we don't know how long they're in there. I can see that they're Bosch Platinum plugs, so not the correct plugs for this engine. These run best on the standard NGK plugs. Okay, now it's coming out. So that's basically what you do. Just work it back and forth carefully. Take your time, because it takes a lot longer if you need to get a broken plug out. Let's see if we can get the first one out of here. Okay. Well, this is a Bosch Platinum plug. I am not that familiar with what they're supposed to look like. The tips look very, very weird, but has a sooty ring around it, and it's light brown part of the way down the insulator. So this one's probably been firing, but we'll get all these out and then I'll show you what they look like. A little while later, got them all out. They were all pretty stuck, but managed to get them all out after a while. So it only took maybe half an hour or so. Looks like all of them except one were firing, so maybe we were down on just one cylinder instead, but it sort of felt like two. This one's definitely not been firing and smells a lot of fuel. The other ones have been firing, but they're not the correct plugs. Here are the correct ones, NGK's BR7EF, and they're a tapered fit plug. These are as well. So be careful when you put them in. They don't need to go in very tight, and of course use anti-seize on them. But all came out well. I did blow out all of this area with compressed air before I started, but I'm going to blow it out one more time, check the gap of the plugs, put anti-seize on them, thread those back in, get all of the leads on, double check that the firing order is correct on this bank, and then we should be able to fire it up, and hopefully we have a V12 again. A little bit of a status update. Ended up removing this out of the way, the AC compressor, even though I said I wouldn't. Got the plug out with it in place, but I couldn't get a new one in because previous owners, I don't know why, like half of these V12s, I find especially this plug up here is cross-threaded. So took it out, chased the threads, everything's good now, got a new plug in there. Then I thought, you know what, let me just do the one on the other side. And that was the tightest one yet. I think I spent about half an hour getting it out. So just in and out, in and out, in and out, working it. And finally got it out. And it looks like it didn't take any threads with it, but it was cross-threaded as well. So I don't know what people are doing. It's not that difficult. So chased the threads, managed to save them. Got a new plug that I could put in, just finger all the way in, and then tighten down. So I'll put this back into place, and then do the other ones later, but we just want to see if this thing fires into life and if we have a V12 or not. It's all back together, so now we're going to see if we can fire it up. I have hooked up the battery, the disabled immobilizer and all of that. I want to show you guys this. This is that spark plug on the other bank. I said that it took me half an hour to get out. I'm not sure how the focus is here, but see the first couple threads? They're completely mangled. So I have no idea how anyone was able to do this. This is some of the worst I've seen. So just be careful. These are aluminum engines. They're old. This one's 39 years old. So, you know, if a spark plug doesn't go in all the way finger tight, take it out, go to your parts store, buy a tap, just clean out the threads. You'll thank yourself. But now, let's see if this thing fires up. Hopefully, we have a 12-cylinder this time. Alright, let's see. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Alright, it's still not running on every cylinder on this bank. Let's take out the third plug on here, because that is the one that before was all black and sooty. And we'll see now if it's, you know, drenched in fuel or what's going on. I used the stethoscope and I listened. Every single injector sounds identical. They're all clicking away nicely. So let's just it really feels very, very dry, and basically as if it probably hasn't gotten any fuel on it at all. I am just going to take out, I'll just take out an adjacent plug here. We'll take out the second one on this bank and just see if that one has any indication of the engine, you know, running, because yes, they only ran for maybe 3 minutes or so, but there we go. If the plugs look different, then I'll know that we're not getting any fuel in there. And then I have a couple tricks that can help to unstuck the sticky injector. They smell differently. And this one's warm and this one is quite cold. I'm going to show you guys the difference. We got the two plugs here. This is the 3 and this is 2. If you see there, you see the little heat mark there on the end of the electrode and nothing on that one. So this one's not been firing. So let's figure out if that is an ignition issue or if that is a fuel issue. Before I put the plug back in cylinder number 3, I thought, let's just actually check that we have compression in that cylinder. So just hooked up a compression gauge. I disconnected the ignition system and the fuel. So it should just crank over now. Hopefully you can see something on there. Yeah, I mean, I don't have to even check even more because I'm just not really interested in the level, just how much. We got like 180 psi. So, okay, good. That is not the issue. Let's put the plug back in, check for spark, and if we have spark, then we know we have a dirty or stuck injector. Plugs are back in. Hooked up the ignition again and put in that little spark tester over there. So you're supposed to get a red light there if you have spark to that cylinder. So I'm going to fire the engine up and let's see if that blinks or not. Hey, that is blinking away nicely. So the issue seems to be with the third injector over here. And when I listened to it, I thought I heard it click, but it can sometimes be difficult with so many injectors on the same rail. But they all sounded the same. So this is a little bit just of a temporary contraption right here. This is a 12-volt battery from an old power drill. I just keep it around for these purposes. And these are just regular, test leads, and yeah, works well. So what you want to do is manually trigger that injector, but not for too long with 12 volts. Normally they run off 3 or 4 or something, so you don't want to burn it out, but you can sometimes shock them back into life with a little bit of extra. So let's see if it clicks. It's clicking. So I'm going to do this a couple times now, and if we're lucky, this will sort of free it up. Okay, I'm going to move this to the side. Now I'm going to cycle the key, get fuel pressure in there. I'm going to do this a couple more times, and hopefully that will get things flowing through the injector. Okay, now the rail should be pressurized. Let's try this again. Alright, that is plenty of times. I'm going to plug that injector in, and let's give this another shot. Let's just have a look. Now it looks very good in there. We'll plug this in again, and we'll give this one more shot. Alright, let's try this one more time. Sadly, that was a bit of a false positive. However, there is good news. Just 1 minute. It ran on 11 again after a couple seconds. So I did the whole thing one more time. It ran on 11 again. I used one of my favorite tools, these pliers that are fuel hose pliers. You can get them, on Amazon or anywhere. And I used them to pull off each one of the spark plug boots, and I figured out that it was, cylinder number 3 that we had the issue with all along. But I thought, you know what? Let this thing run up to temperature just so I can check other things. I want to make sure that the head gaskets are holding, they're not smoking or anything, and it holds temperature. So I did all of that, and I was playing around, got the climate control working, not the AC, of course, but everything else. So I've just been messing around. And then I went inside and I called the owner, and I told him that I'm sorry, it's still, on 11, but maybe we need to buy an injector or get a set of injectors. And he's like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. And I went out here and I was about to film an outro saying, this didn't go so well. And I thought, you know what, let me start it out one more time. Still ran on 11. And I thought, you know what, let me just hold the revs at like 2,500, 3,000 RPMs for a while. That injector will pulsate like crazy, and maybe we'll get it back. And you know what? We did. So let's fire it up again and see if we have a V12. I just had the climate control thing on with the fan, so we can turn that off. It's not that hot. And if you can hear, it's a little bit, not completely perfect, but I'll hold the revs up a bit. are, at least we were before, we are back on 12. Sometimes we're losing it a little bit, but let me see if I can do basically the exact same thing again. Just hold the revs a little bit. And now we are definitely on 12. We've got a 12 cylinder again. Very nice and smooth. And now the electric coolant fan is on when I turn the ignition off. So all of that works. So I think everything's just coming back to life. There we go, it turned off. So it's definitely not perfect, but it is on all cylinders. And you know, ejector cleaner does miracles on this thing. I've had a similar issue with another XJS. I just sat for 2 years and it ran on 10. And I did the same thing with the injectors. And I just drove it a little bit with injector cleaner, and after about 10 minutes or so, it was back to that. It hadn't been sitting at all. So I'm going to get a bunch of injector cleaner on order and some other things. I'm just out. I thought I had another bottle. Run that in, run more fresh fuel in this thing, and I think it's going to come back to life. But I spoke to the owner now, so now we're going to continue with everything. So I'm going to order belts, hoses, a fuel injector kit with all the hoses and everything, and we're gonna do we've done the spark plugs, but we'll do HT leads and the cap and all of that. So just basically bring this thing back into life. He wants it to just, you know, work, and that is a nice thing about these V12s. A lot of people don't think that, but once they're all sorted, they're very reliable. They just need to be used. They hate sitting, but if you use them and don't abuse them, then they're great engines. But I want to ask you guys, do you want to see sort of a small series on this car, basically bringing a car back that's been sitting for over 20 years just back on the road? Not going to be a restoration at all. We're just making a driver. We're just going to go through the brakes. We're going to go through, have a look at some suspension components, see what that looked like. I think we need to do the bushings and the steering rack. That felt quite loose. Service transmission, you know, just do all of that. Do you want to see that in a little bit of a video series? Let me know in the comments down below. Anyways, if you like this video, please give a thumbs up, share it with friends. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe to the channel. It really does help out a lot. Until next time, I'm Adam. This was Living with a Classic. I'll see you soon.